Hi, I wanted to make this video, and today is Friday, July 1st, 2016. It's approximately 4 o'clock p.m., and it's very, very quiet here at the college because, most people are headed home for the 4th of July weekend. But I figured today would be a good day to come here and do this. And when I try this at home, my videos don't really turn out as well, but here at the college, they seem to turn out a little bit better. Before I go on today, I wanted about the work that's coming due. I wanted to really talk to you about, two different subjects. The first one is kind of diversifying in your major and perhaps having more than one major or even having a certificate. And I was at a presentation, and Dr. Cindy Komarinsky, who is now is the Dean of Culinary Arts, Allied Health, and Nursing. So that is her division, and by training, she is a chef, professor. She, works. She was the program director for Culinary Arts, and she has a really big national involvement with this Culinary Arts Association. And the reason why I mentioned her at her interview, one of the things that she said really caught my attention, and it was that she has a daughter, and her daughter has a degree in culinary arts, but she also is an RN. And so her daughter sometimes works as a hospice nurse. And in particular, she worked for this one patient who had some form of cancer. And so she had to give these IVs and had to do shots and monitor her medication and her vital signs and, stay in contact with her physicians and so on. So when you have cancer, you typically work with an oncologist. So, they would have conversations. Sometimes, Cindy's daughter, and then the patient and the oncologist. But the point that about it is, though, as a chef, she could also prepare nutritional food. So she had sort of that background. And, today quite a few chiropractors also have degrees in massage therapy or they are nutritionists. I've seen people who are, you know, more like funeral directors, and so they also, some of them, style hair or have degrees in makeup and or makeup consultants. So those kind of pair really well together. So as you go forward in your college career, consider diversifying a little bit, or even considering like a minor in a foreign language, or even if you pick up a couple foreign language courses, that is really, really invaluable. So, like when you go to some of the southern states, but particularly when you go to Florida, or if you go to the state of Texas, if you go to Arizona or California, there are many, many people there that are foreign language speakers, and so it does help. And a person who's a teacher at WCCC, Dennis Rosansky, said his daughter teaches for the New York City Public School District in the Bronx. And about 90% of the parents and the students there are Hispanic. So to know Spanish very well is helpful. And so she can communicate directly, with the parents, especially to tell them, how their children are doing in school. If you ever watched the show called The First 48, there's a Spanish-speaking detective, Detective Eddie Ibarra, and he's with the Dallas Police Department. He's a homicide investigator. So his, of course, his mastery of Spanish helps him in talking directly to people, that he interviews. So anyhow, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. The second area that I wanted to mention to you from this particular class is if you, like the topic that you did in this class, then in another course, like in effective speech or maybe in a psychology course, sociology, or whatever it may be, you might want to use it again, and you can develop it perhaps in a different way or in a different angle. So that's a thought for you to consider, because some years ago I had a student, and her first name was Karen, and so she did her paper on medicinal herbs and medications and so on. So, of course, your grandparents would tell you this, like sassafras is good if you have an upset stomach or indigestion. So that's one herb that is used. She mentioned all the uses for cattail. So you can burn it, but there's something in it that you can eat. And then she said she gave us an example. There was with Native American women, they were nomadic, and so they had to travel, so they could not have, a large number of children. So they would eat this one plant, and it acted as a contraceptive, so they would not get pregnant. And so it was a really interesting paper. But she went on to got her bachelor's degree in biology at Northland College out in Wisconsin. And so then she decided even to expand this topic more. So that's something you should consider, throughout your college career, because there are benefits of getting to know a topic really, really well and going into it further. So, and of course, this class I think helps you as a consumer to make more informed decisions, medically and otherwise. So now, what I wanted to tell you, sorry. What I wanted to tell you is today for July 1st, your outline is due, and then the one about the problems around the world in the next decade. So what's going to cause us some serious issues. For Friday, July 8th, the first draft is due, and you can post that to the discussion board, typed like in a double-spaced document, 4 to 5 pages, double-spaced. You can put it in that way. If you want to type in directly to the discussion board, that's fine. But you're going to have to post initially to the discussion board. And it doesn't matter, quite honestly, to me, if it's like the introduction and a couple pages, or if it's the middle part of the paper. If you don't really want to write the introduction at this point, that's fine. But make sure to post. And you also are going to have to try to comment on 2 or 3 other papers. Don't just say, this is a great paper, I really like it. Somebody last summer was doing a particular topic, and I cannot recall exactly what it is, but in her rough draft, she said that she was going to seek the advice of a nutritionist and so on. And so a student in our class said, my sister is a registered nutritionist and she works for this hospital, and so she can contact you. So that is helpful. So if you have expertise, or if you know of someone that can be of help, or if you read of a book or have seen a television program or something, by the way, by all means make sure to mention it. Myself, in teaching, I certainly do not know all the answers, and I don't have information on every single subject. So that's why I rely on student input and student ideas. So if you can get recommendations, or if you feel maybe the paper is too spread out, it's like too broad, and they need to narrow it down, then say that. The only comment that I have is be fair in the comments. Don't say, I totally disagree with this, I think this is a bad idea, and you're going in the wrong direction. So I spoke about this student in my class who was a certified midwife. And there was another student that was going to become an RN, and she did not believe that you should ever have a child outside of the hospital. Or if you were a midwife, there's like a certified nurse midwife, I believe there is. She said, that's okay, but you should never, deliver a baby outside of the hospital. So, that was her point of view. But I said to her, at least consider her viewpoint or her perspective. To be quite honest with you, in teaching this class, there are some papers that I do not personally agree with, and I'll give you a really, really good example. There was a student in this class who wrote about the harm of vaccinations and how she felt it should be voluntary that children get vaccinations. She feels like too many of them were given all on one day. It hurts the infants or toddlers' immune system, and there's all kinds of problems. Like I said, I personally do not agree with that. As a matter of fact, not this last spring, but the spring before, I went down to Disney. Could you imagine being on a plane with a child or an adult that has measles or mumps or whooping cough or whatever, or being on a ride with that person? So, of course, it's very, very infectious. But anyhow, I read the paper and I gave her the benefit of the doubt. And it was ironic, though, that right after the class ended, these two young children, maybe they were, I don't know, 2 or 3 years old, they were twins, and they got locked into a vehicle. And they weren't in there really a long time, but the coroner concluded that before they had been in that car a day or two before that, they had been given their vaccinations and injections and so on. And so that had a contributing factor to their death. I don't remember how it was, but I thought, boy, that was interesting. But with this particular topic, as far as vaccinations, some years ago, a student did a paper in this class, and it was the topic of HPV, which is human papillomavirus. And what it was, it's a sexually transmitted disease. And she said in this one school, I think it was in Washington, D.C., they tested every single student, and they found out that they were about 60% of the students were infected with this HPV. Some people affected more than others. These days now, for children or teens or whatever, they get this vaccination and it has not become an issue anymore. I actually had a student in this class some years back that developed cervical cancer from being infected by this. So I'm just mentioning that, like I said, sometimes you have topics and you may not personally agree with them, but try to have an open mind to them. And I've certainly learned that over the years from teaching this class. So the second draft is going to be due by Friday, July 15th. And again, that one will be more around 8 pages or so. It doesn't have to be that, but I mean, more or less in that vicinity. That also will be posted to the discussion board. So, you want to develop your paper more. Keep in mind, when you get to the final draft, this is something that I wanted to tell you, is whatever sources you have cited in the paper have to be in works cited. So, and then always remember is how they start in works cited is how they're going to also have to be cited in the paper. So if you have a known author, then of course you would have like Will 32. If you wouldn't have an author, then you go to the next thing, which would be, the title. So like I said, they have to match up. If you have a little bit of a problem with these citations, use that website called easybib.com. That's a good place to learn how to do these citations. And so anyhow, and then of course, if you use EBSCOhost will do the citations for you. You can see that when you look at the sources there. So that's what we have to do. And again, like I said, for the second draft, you're going to have to comment on at least 2 or 3 papers. For the second draft, I'd like you to give a little bit more in-depth comments and feedback. And, I will comment on each of the papers and so on. Keep in mind, this is something else that I wanted to tell you. When you introduce sources in a paper, don't say, like Dr. Williamson said. You can say Dr. Richard Williamson, Chief of Pathology and Infectious Diseases at McGee Women's Hospital in Pittsburgh said. So if you can give their background, that helps. Or like when you use sources, according to the highly respected Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta. If you ever look at that paper again that one student sent to me, and it was on post-traumatic stress disorder. So the first time she did the paper, she said, according to realwarriors.net. I didn't even know who that was or what that organization was about. So then when she introduced it again, she said, according to realwarriors.net, a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week website and call-in center for veterans who have post-traumatic stress disorder. And I sent you her paper a while ago. I'd like you to look at how she used sources and introduced them. And then the other thing that I would like to tell you to do, Obviously when you write your paper, when you start your body paragraphs, you always want to have a topic sentence. And then, when you have your source or sources, you can introduce them. But as you end each paragraph, try to draw your conclusions. That's where you advance your paper, and that's where you have what's called analysis. And then I like to see headings in these research papers because they break up the paper into different parts. And so like when you end one section, you can always have a paragraph to review or rehash and draw conclusions and comment. To me, that's a very, very good idea. I think that helps quite a bit. So what I also wanted to tell you is the research paper status report is due by Monday, July 18th. All they want to know at that point is how far you are, who's going to read your paper, what you have to do, and so on. So nothing really major, but I just want to make sure, that you're on your way to finishing your paper and not sort of stalled in first or second gear, to use an analogy. For Friday, July 22nd, there is quiz 2, and again, that has to be due on time. You cannot submit that one late. It's much easier to do than quiz 1. This one is more of a focus on the MLA and the APA style and not so much reading and so on. So this one will not take you nearly as much time. For Monday, July 25th, you have to submit a review of what you learned from writing the research paper in this class, how you narrowed the topic down, finding and using sources, developing and focusing your paper. And then for Friday the 29th, you need to submit your research paper by midnight. I cannot accept it late. If you want to submit it earlier, like if you want to submit it, say, earlier that week, or even if you get done sooner, you can submit it and then I can grade it. And if it's not on target, you can work on it again. The point that I want to tell you, if you send it to me at midnight on the 29th of July, don't send me an email when I grade it, said, I want to revise this. I realize that I sent you the wrong copy, or, I didn't include all of my sources. At that point, it's too late because I have to turn grades in. So I'm considering your perspective, but I also want you to understand my perspective. When you're done with this course, you do not need to keep the textbook. I mean, you can sell it or give it to a friend or whatnot, but keep the handbook, the Writing Research Papers, by Lester and Lester. So I went to college in 1977, and I used that handbook then. And I don't believe the senior Lester, like the father, I don't believe he still teaching, but the son is. So it's like one of the preeminent first-rate handbooks that you can use. And if you learn any techniques that you like from this class or the way that I've taught, good. If you don't like the way that I taught, you feel like I'm overbearing, I'm too critical or whatever, that's fine. But just the way that I like to teach is I like to give you feedback verbally and in writing, but I also like to tell you areas that you excel in and areas that you need to have work on. And like with your drafts, don't get offended if I say, this is not good, or, you really didn't spend enough time on this or whatever. All I am doing is expressing an opinion and telling you why and how I think you can improve. And I've had too many classes myself as a student where they say, good job, want great paper, C+. Well, why not a B+? So anyhow, that's kind of where we are. The final paper is 12 to 15 pages, 12 to 15 sources. It can be longer than that, so if you want to go longer, that's fine. So I'm at 19 minutes, and that is more than enough. Thanks.